Hey, what's going on? This is the OG Kickoff. I'm Connor O'Gara. Will, we have a treat for the people. A new weekly treat for the people. It just meant more. If you hear the different music, you know exactly what that means. Or maybe you don't, because that's the first time that we've ever played this music. We are on a weekly basis now with the OG Kickoff going to be recapping classic SEC games. We did a ton of this during the pandemic. We haven't done one of these in 4 years. But when I say we, I meant like Marler and I used to do these back in the day. So these are old. This is your very first It Just Meant More. And we're doing 2021 Ole Miss at Tennessee, the Lane Kiffin mustard golf ball game. Will, it's good to be here. I'm excited for tonight.
Connor, Lane Kiffin, what?
Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, man.
YouTube, don't strike us. Don't give us any sort of strike. I hope we're good.
I told Connor, if you don't get the mustard references, man, Kendrick played the Super Bowl last year. It's been a calendar year. You know, it's Lent. I don't know how that factors in. But yeah, dude, you told me, okay, you know, you could watch the condensed game. You could watch the entire game broadcast. Brother, I probably spent 7 hours on this. I went through. This is one of those games that you got to watch you got to watch every injury, real or not. You got to watch because it's like watching a documentary. Like, did you watch the Woodstock 99 documentary?
I have. Very, very well done. Enjoyed that.
They're very similar to that, where you just start to see things are going a certain way, and you're like, how is this going to happen? Every little thing starts to matter. So yeah, I think this is a great choice for our first one.
I'm very excited to be doing this. Yes. Like I said, these are classic SEC games. These are the types of games that we do because I think if you're telling someone who doesn't follow college football, hey, why do you like this sport that is so regional, so personal, so specific to how people are raised? I'd say because these are the types of games that any human being can watch and get entertainment out of. So this game, especially a very, I mean, you know, it's not infamous. It's just a famous football game that happened. And maybe it's not necessarily famous for the actual football that occurred, but the things that occurred on the football field and everything that led into this. So this is, of course, Lane Kiffin's return to Knoxville. It is nearly 12 years after he left Tennessee for USC, after he was in Knoxville for 1 year. We have now the new context of Lane leaving Ole Miss for LSU, different in some ways, similar in other ways. And Lane returning to Oxford this year is something that, look, we're going to talk about a lot this offseason. Like, it's going to come up very frequently. That game is now going to be the game of the year. So this felt like a really good place for us to be able to start over with It Just Meant More. And look, that one is going to take on a different beast than that. I'm going to say that right now. Like the juice, it's almost impossible to have more juice for a game than what was in Knoxville on this night back in October of 2021. But those wounds had kind of healed a little bit, or at least some of them had. And when these two teams play, well, I shouldn't say these two teams, when Lane Kiffin faces another X in 2026, the wounds will be much fresher. And I just can't wait for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's really discrediting Lane's ability to troll, right? Because, like, he got in a fight with Ole Miss's women's basketball coach on Twitter the other day. Each day is a unique, beautiful canvas for Lane Kiffin to just create new trolling opportunities. So I think give it some time, you know, we could get here. And I'll say, too, this is a game that is so fascinating to me, and I've alluded this to, you know, hit us up at theogkickoff@gmail.com. Tennessee fans and Ole Miss fans, when you're looking back at this, like Tennessee fans, do you feel good about this? Do you feel vindicated? Do you wish you had thrown more stuff? Do you still, you know, or do you feel a little bit embarrassed? Ole Miss fans, you know, feeling the relief and feeling like, oh, we got stuff thrown at us. Do you wish you were there to throw stuff at Lane Kiffin? Looking back, would you have joined in? I think that's what's so fascinating about this game is like truly usually in a It Just Meant More game, I think every single one that's been done, the winning team and even sometimes the losing team walks away with a happy feeling. In this game, probably both fan bases are upset.
And, you know, the interesting thing, too, is that, you know, you say, would you throw things at Lane? I really don't think, and what gets forgotten about this game, something that we'll get to later with our categories, which we have plenty of to work through here, plus an interview coming up with Tom Hart, which he will recap all of the things that he saw from broadcasting that game that night with Jordan and Cole and how special that game was for a variety of reasons. But those objects being thrown were not necessarily at Lane in the way that the golf ball incident made it seem like. And it was a buildup, and there was horrible, horrible officiating, at least in the eyes of Tennessee fans, that led to this 20-minute delay that kind of signifies this game. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hopefully you can see that background of said mustard bottle, certain things that are. Well, we're trying to launch a YouTube channel. We can't give YouTube many chances to give us a strike. We can't do that. But yeah, this game, it is, it's fascinating because, Will, at a time then in which the transfer portal was still kind of in its infancy, NIL, the first season of it, we didn't really have a ton of these revenge type games. We've done like the Zach Mettenberger game where he returns to Georgia, and it's this great moment for our guy Aaron Murray. But like, revenge games weren't necessarily as much of a thing in the pre-NIL, pre-portal era. And I guess this is still portal era, but it's going to become a lot more common to have these revenge type games. A lot of people talk about this stuff, but it's probably going to be less revenge games for coaches. If all these lesser power conference programs have more money to spend on coaches, then usually you're not seeing a coach leave one power conference job for another. But my God, did we get some reminders of Lane Kiffin leaving Tennessee for USC and ultimately, ended up at Ole Miss. This game is going to spark a lot of questions, a lot of discussion as we look back on it. But here's a question I want to start off with for you, Will. Knowing the current context of Lane, wherein he is now your guy, coach of the Bayou Bengals, do you think rewatching this game for Ole Miss fans is much harder, or do you think it's actually easier and Ole Miss fans will have peace of mind when they email us, again, the ogkickoff@gmail.com?
I mean, I think this was long enough ago that you almost have to remember it fondly. You won the game. It was kind of Ole Miss's introduction kind of into the national stage, right? There was some other stuff that happened, but like when you think about like we're going to be Ole Miss, we're not going to have like the Hugh Freeze era obviously happened, right? But you're kind of coming off of the cloud of that. Are we ever going to be back? Was that a fluke? And to like be in that environment and for your team to perform that well and for you to be that proud of it, I would say that's probably a top 5 game that most Ole Miss fans can remember in terms of vibes. Because me as a trash talker, like I love it when the opponent hates you. I love, I always talk about the Kobe commercial. I've been hating you. There's nothing better than when the opposing fans hate you and you're under their skin and you still win.
And that is what Lane Kiffin embraces in this one. So that leads us into our categories. The way that we do this, we kind of set the scene with the characters, the people that are heavily involved. Sometimes we have an interview, sometimes we don't. We'll get to the plot of the game, a bunch of different categories for this. So let's start with the directors, which is just the head coaches of this game, most notably Lane Kiffin. You talk about Lane embracing the fact that so many people hated him in this one. This game is only being discussed today because of how many people hated Lane Kiffin that night on Rocky Top. What's easy to forget at this point, you talk about it being like the first moment for Ole Miss kind of in the national spotlight. He at that time in 2021 is just trying to show that he can build a power conference program because it's year 2 of the Lane Kiffin era in Oxford. And it's the middle of the season. And the 2 games before this, you had a blowout loss at Bama, which is the infamous get your popcorn ready game in which Lane went in feeling like he's about to take down his, the GOAT and, his mentor, Nick Saban. And obviously that did not happen. And then the Arkansas game, aka the last It Just Meant More game that we did 4 years ago. If you want to dig into the archives, you can find that. I think it was 52-51, a game in which I fell in love with one KJ Jefferson, and it was so unbelievably fun to watch. So in a way, we're kind of picking up where we left off with that. Ole Miss at this point is number 13 in the country. Lane had not been in the top 10 as a head coach since October 12th. Or no, not October 12th, October 2012, when he was the head coach at USC. So we're talking about something that's nearly a decade in the making for Lane Kiffin. And there's a lot at stake for him because even in the 14 playoff, this game was important. And Ole Miss was still considered a team that had playoff life. They were, trying to be able to get another marquee road win. And it's not necessarily marquee because Tennessee's unranked, but Tennessee looked like a program that was on the rise, was improving early on with Josh Heupel in that first year. And, then you factor in, of course, all the other elements of, starting campus wide riots and, just conducting the worst press conference that you will ever see for a head coach leaving. This game was just as juicy as it gets.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it is the classic, the scorpion thing that they talked about this year about the scorpion promises you it won't sting you. I actually, when talking about coaches, am not going to talk about Lane Kiffin at all. Funny enough, so I think that context is known. It's known to the people. Do you have anything else on Lane Kiffin?
No, we can go to Heupel because Heupel's in an interesting place too. He's kind of the guy that's just like in, taking it. He's in the background of this wild scene. And at points in this game, if you rewatch the full 3 hour, 50-minute version, you kind of forget that Heupel's there. You need to like remind yourself, oh yeah, there is a coach on that other sideline. I don't know if you see Josh Heupel have a moment of animation amidst this chaos, but in many ways, and Will, I don't know if you picked up on this too, or if you kind of had this flashback. Josh Heupel was brought to Tennessee to do the things that Lane Kiffin was supposed to do a decade plus earlier. And here he is having this offense that is, looking like it's capable of doing those things. Light up scoreboards. The goal is to have an identity nationally and prevent the program from being an embarrassment in the way that it was with Dooley, with Butch, with Pruitt. Points and vibes. Points and vibes is such an underrated thing for a year one head coach to just go out and try and obtain. And that is exactly what Josh Heupel is trying to do with this year one team, because even though he inherits what looks like a year zero roster and everybody's kind of looking at them going, they don't have the personnel. Like, remember, this is before you could really recruit the portal and all of a sudden just have 40 different transfers on your roster. In the wake of the Jeremy Pruitt fallout, there was this feeling of like, yeah, they might have a better scheme, but guys, like this is going to take some time. And then, the only thing that really made us feel like, oh, this team just doesn't necessarily have it was them kind of fumbling the quarterback situation early on. So it is kind of fascinating to think about where Heupel is at this point of his career, still trying to show Tennessee fans that he can be everything that they hope he can be.
Absolutely. And watching this game gave me a massive sense of respect for Josh Heupel, believe it or not. And when I said, I wasn't going to talk about this head coach, this is actually where I'm going to go. I'm going to talk about Art Briles, and I'll tell you exactly why. Okay.
Hey,
so
now.
if you listen to Lane Kiffin and how he builds his offense, he's been quoted by saying, hey, my dad is a defensive head coach. And so what do? The things that would annoy my dad. I do the most annoying things I could possibly find. And so what spoke to him when he went to FAU after, the disgraced Alabama exit, all that? He said, I want to build this weird veer and shoot wide offense. So who does he hire? Kendall Briles. Okay. Because I watched this game and I went, that's not Lane Kiffin's offense.
FAU, that's when Lane Kiffin made that hire.
Yes.
Early FAU is when he made that move.
Yeah. 2017, he goes to FAU. He hires Kendall Briles. Now, Kendall Briles only stays there for a year. He replaces him with Charlie Weiss
Jr.
and runs his offense. Okay. So Lane Kiffin gets the Ole Miss job. It's a crazy time. All this stuff's going on. It's like December of 2019. He has to quickly fill vacancies, right? And he goes, you know what? I'm not putting that veer and shoot stuff down. What I'm going to do is hire Kendall Briles' brother-in-law, Jeff Lebby.
Yep.
Okay. Where does he poach him from, Connor?
He got Jeff Lebby from UCF.
And who was the head coach at UCF?
And Josh Heupel was the head coach at UCF. There's a lot of overlap. Like,
yes,
the similarity.
Yes.
I kind of forgot this watching the day of, like, all the overlap between this. And I was even thinking about, like, both coaches kind of had their left on the tarmac moment of failure. With Josh Heupel, it's at his alma mater. With Lane Kiffin, it's USC and all that. And both both spent several years rebuilding their careers and having to go the coordinator route. And, they're both, spent 3 years as group of 5 coaches in Florida too. And, they eventually get their respective SEC gigs. And it's interesting you bring that up, because I kind of thought that too, of like, man, they are more mirror images of one another, totally different in personality, could not be more different in personality, but they are really kind of mirror images with the way that they like to operate. You would just never know by interacting with them.
Yes. And so for this brief second in time, right? Because you know me, I've been watching a ton of Lane Kiffin tape, getting excited for LSU. And I'm watching this old Lane Kiffin offense. I'm going, I don't recognize this at all. I know what this looks like. It's on the other side of the field, right? And what's crazy now, looking back, is we can go see what Lane Kiffin has done with Charlie Weiss. We can go see what Jeff Lebby has done at Mississippi State. And we can go see what Josh Heupel has done since then, and how these are all kind of radically different offenses. But for this brief moment in time, we're watching receivers in the concession stands on both sides going, huh.
The splits just couldn't be wider. It could not be wider. They kept bringing that up. It is kind of wild to watch. And with some of these, it just meant more games that we're gonna do. That's like the first thing you notice. I mean, I remember, we did like a great Herschel game back in the day. We did like bow over the top and some of the formations that you see, like, well, it's a different sport watching it compared to what these two head coaches are trying to do. I definitely just pictured what it would even look like for Josh Heupel to say, "Get your popcorn ready," or using like a rat poison emoji. And I can't picture that at all whatsoever.
Just take your friends to the ball game. Have a good time.
Yeah. Just everybody enjoy yourself. You having fun? All right, good.
Get home safe.
Yeah, get home safe, kids. This game is only held in high regard though because of the Heupel element. Because if this is just a 35-7 Ole Miss victory, uh, that wouldn't have given us mustard bottles, golf balls, vape pens, all of which ended up making their way onto the field that night. But in addition to Tennessee's sense of urgency in year one, just this desire to not be the butt of the joke, you had the added element of this being early in 2021, where remember, we're coming off the COVID season. The vibes and the energy of some of those games to start off 2021, and everybody goes back to like I think it was a Friday night, it was a Thursday night or a Friday night, the UNC Virginia Tech game, and Blacksburg was bumping, and it was crowds are back. College football is so back. In Tennessee this night embraced all of that in ways that they could not the previous year. And honestly, several of the previous years because of what they had to watch, and getting to watch a team that could score in the way that Tennessee could brought a lot of life back into that stadium. And, it's also interesting to think about too, Will, the very first pod that we did together, you and I, back in 2021, the day Josh Heupel was hired. So full circle moment for all this stuff.
Yes, and that was my little Easter egg there as we started the last podcast with me being a little bit neuroatypical about Josh Heupel. We're going to also start this one about because this is my most interesting offensive guy, and we see that in the way that he's a downhill runner and the way that Levy kind of isn't now. And you can kind of see again how we talked about him adapting, all that stuff. And again, we're now referencing this as the Woodstock 99 of the SEC. The COVID part of it is such a big deal because you're so right. We have crowds in person, okay, and they have like all this angst built up. And you alluded to this in the preview, so I looked it up. They said they had not had a sellout crowd in 4 years before that game. And so this was a true, 102,000 whatever crowds rocking. Like this is the Roman Coliseum that we now know, the Josh Heupel teams bring.
If Woodstock 99, if they had the presence of mind to just not charge for water and just find free water available, a lot of disasters probably would. Maybe if Limp Bizkit stays home that year, a lot of disasters.
If Limp Bizkit just stayed home generally. And hey, Tennessee ran out of water this year in a game, so yeah, maybe they still haven't learned.
Exactly. All right, the A-listers of this one, because we're going to get to there are a couple other things that we'll get to with the assistants in this one, but the A-listers, there's not a ton at this point. Matt Corral is the obvious one though, who is emerging, and I guess you could say he's kind of a breakthrough performer in some ways, but he is an A-lister at this point because he's in the Heisman Trophy conversation. If you've listened to us for a bit, if you are an OG listener of the OG Kickoff, you know that I hold a very special place in my heart for pre-Auburn injury Matt Corral in that 2021 season, in which he was awesome. His decision-making was vastly improved in year two in that offense after a 2020 season in which he had 2 games with 5 interceptions, one with 5, one with 6. He had the disastrous Arkansas game, the disastrous LSU game. And I did a story on him early in that 2020 season when he got off to like a nice start. But this is before 2021. And I spent like 20 minutes talking to him over the phone about learning the Kiffin offense and what it took to master these concepts and how frustrating it was early on. And he just could not get it. And then he basically forced himself, I'm going to show up at 5 a.m. I'll bring breakfast for everybody. And I'm just going to sit here and I'm not going to let myself not learn this offense with this golden opportunity that I have? And there were peaks and valleys with that in year one, and many, many more positive moments, I thought, in year two. And, you got to remember too, that the Matt Corral arc is kind of perfect for that era and not something that I think we can expect to see in this era of college football anymore. And perhaps that's why my appreciation of him has grown a little bit, because this was really when his football career peaked in a lot of different ways. Like Matt Corral peaked probably on this night in Knoxville. Think about this. He goes from a late flip to Ole Miss after Dan Mullen wanted Emory Jones more than him, and he was committed to Florida. And Dan Mullen's like, I'd rather have Emory Jones because he was getting that job at that time. And
What a sentence. Yeah.
right, a lot of different ways you can go with that sentence. He was throwing haymakers as a backup true freshman quarterback in 2018 in the Egg Bowl. Who could forget? He starts but gets benched in 2019 running the Rich Rod offense, which John Rice Plumlee, much better fit in the Rich Rod offense than he was. And John Rice Plumlee was electric as a true freshman during that 2019 season, the final season of the Matt Luke era. And then Kiffin is hired and he wins the quarterback battle. And after an up and down 2020, and a 2020 in which Lane sticks with him, he's like, I don't care if you have these grenade games, we're building here. I think you have the tools. And then at this point in 2021, he's a legitimate Heisman Trophy candidate with things that he did in the first half of the season. Like he's leading the only offense in America that hasn't thrown an interception yet. I mean, the decision making was so much better in year two in this offense. And Kiffin is asked by Cole in the pregame, what gives you that kind of calm when you come out and you get that type of reception? We'll get to what exactly those words were with Tom Hart in a bit here. And Kiffin answers the question by just looking at Cole and going, Matt Corral. Yep. That's why he's an A-lister and not just a breakout performer.
Yeah, and again, like a little bit of foreshadowing there, and we'll get to this stuff later, but the QB depth chart here is just nuts, right? Like on one end, you have Matt Corral, Luke Altmaier, John Rice Plumlee. On the other end, you have Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton, all of whom would see the field. Spoiler alert.
Yes.
But yeah, that he had some really strong games, but I think you kind of hit on some of the foreshadowing of the Kiffin management of the QB position. He had those two just horrible games, and Kiffin just stuck with him. Loved what he saw in Matt Corral, and what we saw in this game is exactly why, because this dude is a dog, man.
Matt Corral was a dog. He was a dog. And it's so easy to forget about him in this day and age. And no, he didn't get to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. We're going to get to the NFL stuff in a bit with him. But just if you watch this game, appreciate the player that Matt Corral was at his best because he was fun to watch. The breakout performer, I have a couple for this. And maybe they'll find that there's more than two, but Hendon Hooker, have to include him in this category. Not until right now doing this did I realize how similar he and Matt Corral were. Really similar in their style. Like they operated in a similar way as these dual threat guys who were just tough as hell. And they both had to win over a new coach who didn't recruit them. Again, do not forget that Hendon Hooker was not just handpicked by Josh Heupel. That was a Jeremy Pruitt recruit who was already there and was already set to go. And then Josh Heupel comes in and he doesn't win that quarterback battle and was not the QB1 to start the season. That was Joe Milton. And Heupel even watched him throughout spring and still made the determination, I'm going to go get Joe Milton, even though Joe Milton was like apparently already on campus at different points. It was kind of like a Jaden Daniels situation that unfolded at LSU. But it was one of the more baffling things to watch Hooker and Milton in game and make and then have in the back of your mind, Josh Heupel is this great offensive mind, and he chose Joe Milton over Hendon Hooker. It's something that if you're just watching these guys in shorts, or we're recording this right now as like the NFL Combine's going on. If you're just watching them at the NFL Combine, all right, like I'll give you that. But it's almost like there had to be this infatuation that Josh Heupel always had with Joe Milton to pick him over Hendon Hooker, given the things that Hendon Hooker was able to do in this offense. It's almost like in you ever seen The Wedding Singer with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore?
When did that? Probably back in the day, but it's been a minute.
Okay. Everyone can see very clearly from start to finish the entire movie how much better Adam Sandler is for Drew Barrymore than the finance rich jerk, whatever. I can't even remember his name. His name wasn't Tag. It wasn't something stupid. I don't remember, but you remember exactly who I'm talking about if you've seen the movie. And
John Rice Plumlee.
It was not John Rice Plumlee.
A name like that, yeah.
Yeah, no, don't do John Rice Plumlee dirty like that. But you just knew after a few games of watching Hooker, well, I at least knew that I wanted to grow old with him. That's a wedding singer reference for the kids, for the folks. Let's not make it weird. But yeah, he's a breakout performer.
Can't laugh into the mic because you say you would have grilled with Hidden Hooker. Yeah, so I think, kind of bringing this all together, right, is the deep ball, as Xavier Leggett said. I won't do his voice too, but I think what that comes down to is seeing the beautiful Joe Milton deep ball in this wide set offense, thinking to yourself, oh my God, this opens up the whole playbook. But then you look at what these quarterbacks bring you, which is not only the mobility and the toughness. Ooh, there were some pretty deep balls in this game. They didn't always find their targets, but a lot of them were overthrows. A lot of them were like, these receivers aren't fast enough. The arm is there. And I think when all that came together for Hendon Hooker, who you talked about, he had kind of like a inconsistent pass. And it wasn't like he was a guy who was just rifle rocket arm, which was apparent with Joe Milton. Once he added that kind of to his game, it was like, well, now you're the best Josh Heupel quarterback.
Yeah, and all of that came together his second year in the system in 2022. But you go back to this moment, and if he had just been a dud in this game, this is the type of game that makes Tennessee fans go, Joe Milton, yeah, he didn't really look good in the first part of the year. He couldn't connect on those deep balls, but maybe we need to go back to him. There was still kind of a wait and see with Hendon Hooker, and I think the way that he showed toughness in this game, down to the very end, in which he suffers the injury, spoiler alert, and Joe Milton has to come into this game. You see the side-by-side difference, the awareness, the presence of the moment. Another breakout performer, Cedric Tillman. Man, gosh, one of these guys who would have wasted away if Jeremy Pruitt had held that job. We would have never got to see one of, in my opinion, like the better SEC receivers of the 2020s had Jeremy Pruitt stayed, because in 3 years with that guy as his head coach, 8 catches for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. You can't tell me that is simply the byproduct of the scheme. And instead, Josh Heupel shows up. He plays at an all SEC level. I thought he should have been all SEC that year. He ends up with a 1,000-yard season. He has 12 touchdown catches, really kind of came on and developed into this go-to guy with Hendon Hooker. He's a reason why guys like Cam Coleman get these lofty projections to improve once they get a better quarterback situation and a better scheme. And it's interesting that, Alex Golesh, as I mentioned, was like the offensive coordinator of that. And Cam Coleman, decided to not stay in the Alex Golesh offense at Auburn ultimately. But Cedric Tillman was great in this game. One of those guys with those crazy wide splits. And he had 7 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown in this one, and very much looked like a go-to guy.
That was my breakout player, Cedric Tillman. It was a career high in receiving yards for him. I believe he had 84 in this game. And to your point, he was kind of just hanging out, right? It's Velus Jones, right?
It's Velus Jones. I have thoughts on Velus Jones.
Like, that was clearly the number one receiver. And I remember Jalen Hyatt saying, oh yeah, like I got here and like Velus Jones was the guy. And I remember being like, huh? And then looking back, like he was the guy. Like that was the number one receiver. So Tillman, it wasn't like he was like, it wasn't like he was buried for no reason. They had a really good connection kind of leading up to that point. But to your point, to kind of foreshadow that, the breakout game for Cedric Tillman was the following week against Alabama. So I think there's almost one answer to this. And Hooker's right there, right? I think he had a great game. And we talk about him teetering is a really good point here because of how much Heupel liked Milton. But I think Cedric Tillman going, no, I'm that guy.
Yeah, and he definitely emerged and could have won Tennessee this football game with the ball that just went past the outstretched hands of him in the end zone with that Joe Milton pass.
Okay, really quick. This is one of my cold takes. I'm going to bring this up right now because you just said that. Were you screaming at your television like I was when they were blaming Cedric Tillman for that play and not Joe Milton? Because I'm sitting here going, based on what I've seen, that was just a bit outside for even Cedric Tillman to catch. And they're like, that went right through his hands. He should have caught that. I'm going, you clearly don't know Joe Milton.
And by they, you're saying Jordan. I'm in Jordan's stand through and through.
Oh, yeah, and based on what we knew at the time, it was kind of like, who is this Cedric Tillman guy? But based on what we learned about both of these players and how massive Cedric Tillman was and what a great jump ball receiver he was, it's like he made it look closer than it should have.
Probably. He probably did. That's probably the better takeaway from it. It's one of those it's a game of inches, and that was inches away from being complete. I thought it was a pretty good ball. Like, I thought it was a pretty good ball, and you're trying to put that not totally just up for grabs, but in a place where your guy can go up and get it. I don't necessarily fault either guy. Like, I think either guy made a really good
Tough play.
effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a tough play to make. All right, prominent extras. You already mentioned him before, but Jalen Hyatt, let's bring him up real quick here, because if you didn't know that the Biletnikoff Award winner of 2022 was in this game, don't worry, you're not at fault, because he had one catch for 18 yards and was a virtual non-factor in this offense. And unlike Tillman, he did not explode upon Heupel's arrival. And, he, of course, goes on to win the Biletnikoff Award a year later. And when Tillman kind of is banged up in 22, coming back as, the more established guy, Hyatt just absolutely takes off. He, basically gives Tennessee its biggest 21st century moment in Neyland by beating Bama to end the Saban era drought. I mean, a guy that ends up being such an important player for Tennessee. And I've talked to Jalen about that. And it's a great sliding doors of what would have happened to that Tennessee team if he had decided after this 2021 season, where he had plenty of games like this, so one catch, 18-yard type game. What if he decided in that end of season meeting that he had with Heupel that that was really underwhelming, I need to find another home? The right scheme, right time, everything kind of worked for him the next year, but very early it was in the Jalen Hyatt development.
Again, I owe the University of Tennessee an apology, because that's a really deep receiver room. It truly is. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but my pick for this is going to be John Rice Plumlee. If you really want to see your head spin, a gentleman that played for Gus Malzahn at UCF later on, just to completely bleep this whole thing. Obviously tore up LSU in 2019. And so, yeah, I mean, just a guy who has had a football life.
Yeah, no doubt. Another guy that was in that quarterback room, Luke Altmaier, also. Man, I was a big Luke Altmaier fan, and I wanted to see him replace Matt Corral. I thought he had a lot of really similar characteristics to his game, and he is the backup quarterback in this game, technically, because when Matt Corral gets hurt, it's not John Rice Plumlee who ends up coming in this game. It's the true freshman. It's Altmaier. And both backup quarterbacks, of course, played in this game. And probably because the QB1s combined for 53 rushing attempts in this game. You want to talk about, like, hey, how much does this mean to you? This meant a whole lot. And, pretty telling, I thought, too, with the Kiffin offense, that Altmaier was the one who came into this game when Corral briefly was banged up and had to go to the sideline. And he played instead of Plumlee, who attempted just one pass all year. And it ends up being, Altmaier ends up being arguably the best quarterback in Illinois history. Like Kirk Kittner, also part of that conversation. Like,
I don't like how good the Big Ten's getting.
Jeff George.
I don't like this. There's another great happening in the Big Ten.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, and go figure. Luke Altmaier ends up finishing his career against Tennessee, the team that tried to poach him in the offseason after the Nico stuff happened. Like, very publicly, Brett Bielema said, like, it was Tennessee that tried to come after Luke Altmaier. So maybe a little bit that day was like, hey, we like the fact that this true freshman came into the game and didn't totally crap his pants, although he almost threw an interception. So I guess he kind of crapped his pants a little bit. But
what a sicko call to have him attempt to pass. That was like at the line of scrimmage when he comes in for one play. You're sitting there going, oh my God, this could be the game.
Yeah, very, very wild the way that played out with Matt Corral getting banged up and ultimately, giving way in what could have been a very pivotal play. And then the prominent extras, Jeff Lebby, Alex Golesh, I think kind of lumped together. Two offensive play callers who are now SEC head coaches. At this point, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, I don't think it was really known that Alex Golesh called plays for Heupel. And I believe that was added to his bio after this season. I remembered, like, Tennessee beat writers even were like, oh, that's an interesting little wrinkle. And sometimes coaches keep it really close to the vest, who's actually calling plays, who's not. Hugh Freeze. They try and make it really confusing, but this was something that was added to his resume, and it probably played a part in him getting that job at USF to be able to come in and be a play caller, knowing that, yes, he worked under Josh Heupel in his offense, but if you're calling plays for, what ends up being the number one offense in college football a year later in 22, then that's a really good thing to have on your resume. So I thought that was interesting. Do you remember that being known at the time? Because they definitely didn't bring it up on the broadcast either.
Very true. Yeah, there was like zero mentions. I think it's two things. Part of that might be that Heupel kind of wanted to be the buck stops here guy, and if there are questions about the offense, he didn't want to, do a Hugh Freeze and throw his multiple play callers under the bus, right? But then the other part of that is, you see what happened to Jeff Levy. Maybe he was just like, I want y'all to keep hiring my people, so no one's gonna know who's in charge here.
That's a good point. That is a good point. And meanwhile, Jeff Lebby's on the other sideline, and it was pretty well known at this point that he was the offensive play caller because Lane would have fun with it on social media, and he would make the joke that Lebby needed to get more touches for John Rice Plumlee or something like that. And like he would take a picture with them before the game. And both OCs ended up having to leave and get one more job with total autonomy on offense before they became head coaches. But if you had said at that point, hey, the offensive play callers in this game running these two very prolific offenses will ultimately be SEC head coaches one day, I don't think it would have been considered a stunner, but you'd have been like, all right, what does it look like away from the offensive guidance of Lane Kiffin and Josh Heupel? Also, you could include DJ Durkin here as well. Durkin running the Ole Miss defense. Go figure. Yeah, interesting. Golish versus Durkin in this one. Now they are together at Auburn at a different job. How about that?
Oh my gosh, you're so right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is all roads lead. There's like 10 jobs, man. That's crazy.
I know. Everybody's related to one another. Everybody's using it like a variation of somebody else's offense. There's just overlap galore. Did you have anybody else for the prominent extras here?
I'll say this in terms of prominent extras here. I think that this another interesting window to these two teams. This was a time when both of these head coaches were using a stable of running backs, which they both famously got away from pretty quickly after that. Ole Miss with Quinshon Judkins the next season, and then Heupel kind of like had Sampson come in a little bit later, and to where they went, actually, we're gonna have bell cow backs, but for this brief period of time, you did see the Parishes, the Snoop Conner. You think like, wow, Snoop Conner had all those touchdowns on 130 carries. They just really gave him the rock at the 1 yard line, like fantasy vulture style. So that was kind of my ensemble take, was that that in the future there would be kind of a bell cow put the cape on, and this was more like a by committee.
Snoop Connor's line for this game, what was it, like 15 carries for 24 yards or something like that? It was like the most 90s fullback line that he ended up with, of just every time in short yardage, or if you're in goal line or something like that, that Snoop is getting the rock. Like there's just no doubt whatsoever. Not the most efficient game for our guy Snoop.
15 for 24 yards, two tutties. He did his job.
Love it. Love it, man. All right. Favorite line from the broadcast here. Do you want to start us off, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Part of the reason I chose this game, besides all of the obvious factors that we've laid out, Tom Hart, Jordan Rogers, Cole Kubelik on the call. When the Neyland crowd loses its mind on the debatable fourth down spot, which we will get to, Cole chimes in early, and this wild scene develops like immediately after, within a couple minutes. And within a couple of minutes of that happening, we've got Cole saying on the broadcast, we've got vape pens, water bottles. He led with vape pens, which is just great. And then Cole talks about the golf ball that Lane flashed at him, because Lane gets a golf ball thrown at him after this raucous scene unfolds. Fourth down call doesn't go Tennessee's way. And Lane you could see the camera has this shot of Lane nearly like getting hit by this golf ball. And Lane picks it up and flashes it to Cole, who's, at field level. And, Cole's telling them on the broadcast about it. And Tom goes, was it at least a Pro V1? Great.
Golf ball shaming has never been more warranted, where it's like, oh, okay, what's your golf ball of choice? And I'll piggyback off that. From that moment, my favorite was, here's a good question. Who brings a golf ball to a college football game?
Right? I was thinking about this. I've thought about this a lot the last 4 years. Okay. I guess it's been 4.5 years since this game. The only scenario in which you're bringing a golf ball to a football game, if you're getting a 9, you're getting an 18 earlier in the day, there is still a very small percentage of human beings that can do a full round of golf and a night football game at an SEC stadium. And I think that's key, because if you're just going to a football game, all right, whatever. The crowd that night is not the I'm just going to a football game type crowd. They are there several hours early. If you are not going to that game, um, okay, different perspective. All right. Like, maybe you can golf 9 or 18, and that's perfectly realistic. You need your A game. You need to have full energy. We're talking like a nap in the middle of the day when that mid afternoon lull hits or something like that before then. And then you get up and you go to this night kickoff. That's the only world in which someone is getting a golf ball into the stadium. I'm still amazed it got into the stadium and someone was just able to have that in their pockets. It's mind blowing.
So the question becomes, do you think that was premeditated? Do you think that was brought in ahead of time to throw at Lane Kiffin?
I don't. I don't. Because no one who has ever had a golf ball in their pocket after playing golf has ever done so on purpose. There's just no way. Like I just can't imagine. And you know what? It's the golf ball that probably it kind of clouds what everything else was, all of those objects being thrown on the field, because the golf ball, I mean, if it doesn't hit Lane, it like bounces into him or something at least. And everything else I thought was trying to be thrown on the field as a sign of protest against the officials. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't think that was premeditated, but it would make for a better story. I would love to find the original owner of that golf ball. I really would.
I think, and I'm not exactly going to say it was premeditated, but I'm saying that if you brought an object to a football game to throw at Lane Kiffin, a golf ball of that color would be a pretty good option because it showed up so well. Like, that's something that's kind of next level to think about it like that. And I'll say this is kind of a crazy take, but I'll say it. We've seen all these protests, we've seen things get kind of crazy. Like, one of the guys on the crew shouted out that a cop got hit in the head by a water bottle in this game. This could have gone so much worse. Like, and I actually kind of am going to commend the police here for not losing their cool and just like arresting people, because part of it's like, okay, you got to arrest a couple people to like make a point. I get that. But to just be a member of law enforcement and get hit in the head with something and not go, all right, that's your butt. I think this actually was on the lower end of how this could have gone.
I I'll agree to disagree a little bit on that one. It was a 20-minute delay. It was a 20-minute delay that we ultimately got in this game, in which, and as Tom will get to in a second here, if the cops just started arresting people left and right, it's not a 20-minute delay. And stuff kept being thrown. Like, that's the wild thing when you rewatch like the full version of this game is, and I would encourage people to do that if you've got 4 hours on your hands and you got nothing else to do. But like, you see how deep into this delay people are still throwing stuff onto the field, and how wild that is, that people just were like, hey, first 10 minutes I was really feeling that, but you know what, I got something right now. Like, you're just waiting for the exact right moment, and maybe it could have been handled differently. Ultimately we got what we got, and thankfully, at least as far as we know, no one was seriously tremendously hurt. I'm sure people like that cop got hit with water bottles and stuff like that, and hopefully there was nothing serious, like too serious, but it's just not the type of thing that typically goes on that long. Like a couple minutes. I don't remember how long the Texas Georgia delay was when that happened, and Texas fans were upset with the pass interference call. They started throwing stuff onto the field. I don't think it was full 20 minutes though, in the way that this was.
Yeah, and like we have time to get to this because I do have a couple of gyms that were on the call too. I'll say this: like the fact that there was not deaths, the fact that there was not trampling, when you have a situation of drunk people that are that upset and they outnumber law enforcement to that level, I think they could have done whatever they wanted. Is kind of my point there. Is like they could have just occupied that stadium. If there's 102,000 people and 40 cops, like that could have gone really, really bad. We've seen that happen in overseas in different soccer matches where it's gotten bad, bad, bad. So that it was a bad situation. I'm not getting credit here to like Tennessee fans, but I do think that escalating it wouldn't have been the move from a law enforcement standpoint.
Fair, definitely fair. Any other gems that you found from the broadcast?
Yes, there were a couple of these that got lost in here. And they weren't on camera, so I couldn't pick out exactly who said it. But Cole, it's like the Ghetto Boys. Mine's playing tricks on him down here. How loud is it?
Yeah. Yep. Seemed loud. Seemed real loud.
Ghetto Boys, an all-time great rap group. Love that. And then there was another one. I think this was Hart. Barishnikov would have loved that footwork. by Matt Corral. I had to look this up. This is a Russian-born ballet dancer. So these guys, this entire crew was locked in. They were all like kind of mid-season form here. And so they were dropping gems before the chaos even started.
I was with Tom, Jordan, and Cole the week before this because the week before this, I did a story on them where I basically kind of did like their origins. They at that point were tied with the Joel Klatt, Gus Johnson, and Jenny Taft's crew as the longest tenured trio in college football broadcasting. And I shadowed them the previous week for the LSU Kentucky game. And so like I got to like sit in on production meetings and stuff like that. Like I listened to their entire feed during the game with like producers in their ear, and like you have to like download a specific app and everything to be able to go in there and hear it. And it's really cool to kind of hear their dynamic. And in some ways, the 20-minute delay was almost like insight as to what that's like when they are off air. And it's cool because Cole has an open mic, which usually sideline reporters do not have an open mic. They usually hit a button, like let a producer know, hey, like I like to speak. I'd like to like weigh in on something that's happening down here. I don't know how prevalent that is now, but it was definitely not as much of a thing then. And Cole having the freedom to be able to just drop in references like that and them never talk over each other, I thought kind of added to this moment and what was a scene that needed someone on the field to capture the full levity of it.
A Geraldo Rivera-like reporter.
Yeah, sure. Let's go there. All right. Speaking of those guys, let's kick it to Tom Hart. We'll get into some more stuff with Tom, who shared his very unique vantage point of just one of the all-time SEC scenes. So here is Tom. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Tom Hart, the man who was on the call for this game that we're discussing. Tom, I think you are, in my unbiased opinion, as good as there is in the business at doing opens. And I think that's an underrated skill to kind of set the scene. So if you knew, let's just say you had a crystal ball going into that night, if you knew what was about to unfold, how would you have introduced this game? As if like you're getting to do a movie trailer for this game where you already know everything that's about to happen. And how would it sound when we first see the shot of kneeling on the banks of the Tennessee River? Everything's lit up, and we're trying to figure out what's in store for the evening ahead.
See if I can find the right voice for it. But it would be something like, in a world where he was hailed as a savior, but left for his dream job, 107,000 people have filed into this historic venue to tell Lane Kiffin to off. And it would start with that. I don't know if I could use that specific word.
We'll believe that one. Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, it would start there. And the perfect intro leaves a bit of a tease, right? It's got to be a little bit open-ended so people can then fill in the gaps and go, wait, is he suggesting what I think he's suggesting? Did he just say that there's going to be a riot, an arrest? And how much money did we make from beer sales tonight? Was it worth it? Like all of that kind of has to roll in to that open, but I travel with the crystal ball. I could not have predicted that. That was wild.
Do you remember the production meeting with Lane and how he felt knowing that he was going into the ultimate enemy territory that night?
I don't remember the production meeting. I remember being on the field with him pregame vividly, because when he came out, Jordan and I are usually down on the field until 35 minutes on the clock, sometimes 30. And so he probably came out with 40 minutes on the clock. I'm just ballparking here. And when he came out, the stadium was already primed and the student section was primed. And I don't know which words I'm allowed to use and not allowed to use on this. Sometimes it doesn't matter. I just use them. But there was a very distinct and very loud F Lane Kiffin, F Lane Kiffin. And it was constant. And we were standing at midfield and he came out and he had this bemused is kind of how Lane lives his life. So maybe it was just his face, but to me, it was a bemused look on his face. And he comes out and he goes, I can't believe this. He's like, they're in kindergarten when I was here. They don't even know me. And it was It was bewilderment. It was like, listen, I knew there was going to be something, but that's awfully intense for a group of people who only know me for seeing me on TV. Like they're not mad that I left for the USC job. They're mad that I'm here standing on this field right now. And so that was, I remember that vividly. Like, and he wasn't shook, he wasn't bothered, he wasn't nervous or scared, or it was just like, wow, this is weird. This is a little bit more than I expected tonight. And I think he went in that game expecting plenty, but not that much.
What's so easy to forget about that game and that night is that when all hell breaks loose and Tennessee fans are just chucking anything that they possibly can onto the field, it's actually a gripe with the officiating that
Yeah.
led to that moment and it coming up short on fourth down and what's a key play in that game. And it probably didn't help that Lane was the beneficiary of all this. But this game only reaches that fever pitch because it's a jaded fan base coming off of this decade in which they've been mocked post Kiffin, and they're robbed in this big moment in what's still a really important time early on in the Josh Heupel era. From your recollection, what percentage of that angst in that crowd was strictly the result of Tennessee? I'd say you could pin on Tennessee chaos being related to the officiating, and what was related to just Lane, because it probably wasn't as high of a number as some might remember.
They go hand in hand. And I say that because the result, to use your word, was 99% officiated. But the buildup, Lane, Lane was the driving force behind all of that. I also remember this. We went for lunch. Oh, what was the name of it's since closed down because they've redone the entire strip. Copper Cellar. We went to lunch at great restaurant, Copper Cellar, and we went relatively early. It was like 11:30 in the morning, 11:30. So kind of early for lunch. And I just remember walking over to the Copper Cellar from Graduate Hotel, which was right across the street. And the sheer volume of people that we saw, mostly students who are already tailgating on their way to tailgating, that was probably a 7:30 local time kick. And I'm not saying like tailgating doesn't start early anywhere. I mean, if you've been to Madison, Wisconsin, you know, like it's an 11 a.m. kick. Cases of Milwaukee's best are being carried over shoulders at 6 a.m. But the foot traffic was really high and they were already cracking them open. And I thought to myself, man, I don't know that we've been here for a game this big. And I don't think it was I don't have the records in front of me. I don't think it was nothing huge was on the line. I mean, yeah, Heupel was trying to build Tennessee back up from the Pruitt debacle, but Ole Miss wasn't what they are now. You know, they were just kind of fumbling around in bowl territory for a couple of years with some really talented
They had one
players.
loss. They were a top 15
Okay,
team at the time. So
top 15.
considered big for Tennessee. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was probably at that point one of the biggest night games in a Tennessee era, right? Like in a span going back to pre-Pruitt, right? Because I think their Oklahoma game with Butch was an afternoon game, if I'm not mistaken. I think Oklahoma went there twice before they joined the league. So they had a couple, but it had been a while since it was a really big one. So to answer your question, it was about the officiating in the end, but what primed the pump was this excitement that Lane Kiffin and one loss Ole Miss is in town, and we've got to be ready for this guy, and he's a traitor. And we watched, the video clips of Bud Ford and Mark Nagy and all the local media and all this stuff that happened. We only saw it on YouTube or Instagram, whatever. But now we're really mad about something. And Connor, I'll go back to this. And you have watched this game more recently than I have. My recollection is that there were two big calls in that game. One was the fourth down stop with, unless I'm mistaken, was a good call. He was a full yard short. The other one was a near strip sack of Corral that they ruled that his momentum some direction had been stopped. Now, I remember thinking in the moment, okay, you can't give him a strip sack touchdown. You can't give him a strip six on this. but maybe you blew the whistle early, and it should be Tennessee's football, if not the 6. But I don't. That's just going off of this fogged brain of mine. What did you think after watching? Like, was the as much derision as the refereeing and the officiating got? Were those two calls bad calls or just close calls?
The call on Matt Corral on 4th down, where you're right, that's the first one early. And it's a 4th down play in which it looks like Corral thinks he hears a whistle. And it speaks to the atmosphere that was in Neyland that night. And Corral basically stops on 4th down, which is
That's
like,
right. And isn't he just like holding the ball on his right hand, like loaf of bread type deal?
correct. So at first glance, you're telling yourself, well, there was some sort of whistle and they had ruled this dead or something. There was no whistle. Officials huddled together, and it looks like there is a strip sack in which Tennessee clearly returns it for a touchdown. I, watching it back, thought Tennessee got robbed. I thought that should have been just, hey, quarterback made a huge mistake in that spot. I don't think you ever see forward progress called in that spot because it wasn't like he was like fighting forward or something like that.
Right.
It was pretty clearly he got whipped around and the ball is stripped and it's off to the races for Tennessee. So like if that doesn't happen, we never get mustard bottles, vape pens, all of that stuff. That was early on in that game in which Tennessee like did a really good job of taking control and being able to like kind of get to Corral and making him flustered early on. The 4th down spot, when I saw it in real time, I thought, I think that's a first down. And I thought Tennessee fans, everybody in that building thought it was a first down too. Jordan and you both kind of talked me out of feeling as confidently about that because you're like, well, it's the call on the field. And was there enough to overturn? I thought the call on the field was like way off initially. And I didn't see enough to definitively say on the replay, there was a full yard better. There was a full yard better. So you could have called that in that spot, but I kind of get why they didn't. And yeah, the angst was just, it was already in the air. And the fake injuries probably led to that too, because there were a ton of those that night.
100%. And by the way, like there are very few innocents in this whole scenario, but I don't want to say that you deserve to be attacked verbally or physically or to have crap thrown at you. But Ole Miss deserved a little bit of that derision for how they ran the program when it came to fake injuries at that time.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean, if that's what you want to do and that's how you want to run your program, then be prepared for being greeted by a hostile crowd when you continually get away with it, especially on the road, obviously on the road.
Yes, and on the road, it was very well known, and there, you guys were, at first it was kind of like slow to pick up to it, and then you're like, all right, this is clearly something's going on. What's so wild about the sequence in the subsequent delay is that it's 20 minutes, a 20-minute delay. If it's a rain delay in the second quarter, all right, juice is still going, whatever. This is at like the 3 hour and 15-minute mark. SEC final was already supposed to have started. This is after a long day in which probably Tennessee fans had been having a few cocktails and snuck a few into the game and doing all that. If I recall, there was maybe only one commercial break during the 20-minute delay that you guys like got bailed out with, but filling that time is got to be one of the more challenging things that you've ever done. Because as much as you can go to Cole on the field and he's got the open mic, that dude's trying to just avoid flying objects at that point. So how challenging was that to just be able to fill the time and not come down as like this guy who's just trying to kill the moment and kill the vibe? Because you have to set the scene for what's unfolding, a very rare scene.
Yeah, I remember being on Talkback, which is the button we use to reach the truck. And so fans can't hear us, but we can have conversations with our producer and director during the broadcast. So we're muted to the audience, but it goes in the truck. I remember begging our director, who's fantastic, to get wider shots so you could see the volume of the trash being thrown. And he was limited because, and he knows his job way better than I do, but he was limited because he's like, no, I've got to keep my cameras focused on the particular participants. Kiffin has to have one. Heupel has to have one. We want one on Corral. Like we have to ISO these guys because if they get hit by something, if a whiskey bottle hits Matt Corral in the head, we have to have the shot. And so he was trying to protect himself but I don't think we really captured the enormity of all the trash being thrown and how bad it was. So in that sense, that wasn't hard at all. Like, but because I was maybe a step ahead of the cameras, or he was limited in how many cameras he had and what he could shoot, I had to do a lot of play-by-play of the other angles that you weren't seeing at home. So that made it easy. The hardest thing for me was like I was, to borrow a word from Joe Buck, and when Randy Moss pantomiming the crowd, I was disgusted by the whole thing. Like
You
it was
were. I was going to bring that
I
up.
was so mad, and the students deserve blame. The University of Tennessee deserved blame. Their game operations people deserve blame. The cops that were there, like everybody deserved blame for not just what happened, but how long it was allowed to continue. And so I was kind of walking this tightrope of, all right, like it's not my job to be hypercritical of this fan base or the fans that are, the ones that are acting out. But I wanted just to put them all on blast. I mean, I wanted to, and I don't know, I never went back and watched it, so I don't know how critical I was. I know I had a couple of critical comments, but
Pretty
for
critical.
that 25 minutes, I just wanted to say, you're all a bunch of idiots. Like, what are you doing? And here's the thing, you're idiots because you're still in the game. You still have a chance to win the game until Joe Milton decides he's going to try to run it in inexplicably and runs out the clock. Like, or maybe that was a fourth down. Like, bro, you guys are in this game and you have a chance to win the game. But like, what matters more, throwing a mustard bottle or having your team win the game? That's what pissed me off the most. Is the idiocy of this mob mentality. Like, we're mad because the game's rigged and the refs won't let us win it. Dude, you have a chance to win the game. Just stop. You're going to get penalties and they're going to have to forfeit this game. And then what? Then we have a real riot on our hands.
3 timeouts left in that spot, and they got the ball back. That's the crazy thing, is like
And they got it immediately to midfield, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if the punt return to midfield, and
Nils Jones. Yep.
I don't remember. I know Milton finished. I don't remember how Hendon Hooker got injured on that final drive.
He had been hurt a lot before that and was like trying to play through it. And he came up limping on a play in which I think he took a hit, and it just was like, it was the last straw. And so in comes Joe Milton. And the crazy thing, and the thing that I forgot, and I'm sure like this is going to be brought up at some point during this episode, is like the throw that Milton makes to Cedric Tillman could have been, was like inches away from being a walk-off winner, in which Joe Milton's entire story that year is different if he makes this pass, and it kind of just goes right over the outstretched arms of Cedric Tillman. And then the next play is oh my God, I thought I had more time on the clock. He only had 3 seconds left, and he just ends up running out of bounds. And that's what we all remember. But yeah, it's so wild to look back on, because so many different things happen. And I got to know, and I think you have an answer for this. Statute of limitations is up. Let's just pretend whatever happened that night, the hay is in the barn. All right. Everybody that committed any sort of crime, whatever, we're past that. When you, Jordan, and Cole did your Three Amigos recap on the field afterwards, you're doing SEC final, you're doing your 2-3 minute hit that you guys do for them. What piece of thrown debris did you take home as your souvenir from that night? And please, God, tell me it was a vape pen.
I don't remember us doing the on-field hit that game. Did we do one? Did you see it?
I didn't see it afterward.
We may have pulled the plug on it. I'm not sure.
That's disappointing to hear.
2 things happened post-game. Number one was, no, in fact, we didn't do it on the field because we did it from the booth. And I know this for a fact because as soon as we went off the air from the game and we were preparing to do a post-game hit, whether that was live on the post-game show or not, I don't remember. But as soon as we went off the air and I tossed it to Dari back in the studio, my phone rang. I mean, instantaneously. And it's Greg Sankey. And I picked up. I said to our producer, Billy Palladino, I was like, hold up, Sankey's calling, which must have confused the hell out of Bill. And I pick up, I go, hey. And his words were something to the effect of, what the hell just happened? He was furious. I mean, I think looking at the SEC release after the fact and everything that happened and the way it was handled, I'm not telling tales out of school. The league office was none too pleased with Tennessee and how they handled things. Um, so I didn't get a souvenir that day or that night, but then when we went back to Oxford, it might have been for the Egg Bowl that year to close the season or early the next season. That was an October game, right? Like mid-October? Sound right?
Yeah, this game was mid-October. It was actually the week after. Yeah, I was with you guys literally the week before the
Oh
LSU
yeah.
Kentucky game, and then the week after. I probably should have changed my schedule to be there for this one, looking back. But yes, it was mid-October.
So the Oxford Chamber of Commerce does a fantastic job of making us feel welcome anytime we go there. I think this was for the Egg Bowl, but it may have been the following season. And there's usually a gift bag with, a pennant and a whatever else in there, a candy bar and a couple bottles of water, maybe a beer. On this particular journey, I got
No
this.
way.
Yeah,
You
it
have the
is.
golf ball?
Well, no, hold on. This is a recreation. Okay,
Okay.
just to be
Okay.
fair. In fact, it is a Titleist true feel. Like it is as exact as you could be. The one the one reason you know that this isn't the exact ball is, and I don't know you'll be able to see it. Probably not. They printed the final score
Oh yeah. Okay.
on the golf ball and they gave it out as, like, I mean, what a genius idea by the Chamber of Commerce. I have one more theory, by the way, and I don't know if you have considered this or look into it. And let me give you a little bit of background. Earlier that season, we had a game in Oxford, and I don't remember who they're playing. I think it was a non-conference. And Jerrion Ely came in to meet with us, and I was so impressed with that kid. Like, not only just a great conversationalist and good discussions, but an incredible athlete. And Lane was leaving the room as Jerrion was coming into the room. And there was a very awkward exchange between the two. And then Lane kind of shuffled his feet and walked down the hallway. And Jerrion sits down. Hey, you huge smile. How you guys doing? I go, wait, hold up. What was that? I go, what's it like playing for that guy? And he goes, man, that guy, that's one weird dude right there. And I go, what do you mean by that? And he said, I am not kidding you. He goes, he is such an introvert that he will walk through our facility with his head down. He said, he goes, I'm not nobody. Like, I'm kind of an important part of this team. He won't even say hi to me. He won't make eye contact. He won't say hello to me. He goes, I will stop and I will jump in front of him. So then he has to stop and he has to look up. And I force my head coach to make contact with me. And I say, hi, coach, how are you today? And he'll go, oh, hey, Jaron, how are you doing? Good to see you. And then he'll walk around me and walk off. That information leads me to this. I think what happened that night in Neyland Stadium was the birth of Lane Kiffin, the troll.
Mm.
I think that's where his personality really jumped. And he thought, okay, and listen, I'm not trying to get in Lane's head. But if you go back and look at it with hindsight being a tool, I think that was if not the moment where Lane Kiffin went, okay, if I'm going to be treated like this, and if you're going to come at me and I'm going to garner all of this energy, well, then I'm going to give it right back. And I'm going to find a way to poke everybody out there for either his own entertainment or for the value that he gets from it, as a coach and recruiter. I don't know which, but I think you can I don't remember Lane Kiffin acting like he does now. I don't remember much of that early in his Ole Miss career. There was some social media barbs and like he'd like to talk junk, especially to other coaches. But I think that might have been the birth of Lane Kiffin, the troll that we know as his public persona.
It's an interesting theory, and one that I've always tried to pinpoint if there was a specific moment, because You're right. The social media stuff, it kind of is what it is. But in terms of being able to look out at a crowd, and you could almost see it in that pregame conversation he has with Cole, where he kind of realizes the impact that he has on people. It's one thing to see it
Yeah.
online. It's one thing to hear it from your boss. It's another to see it in the flesh like that. And to that point in his career, he hadn't ever played that role in person. Now, it's one thing to say, get your popcorn ready before Alabama, a game that already happened, but they don't have the same vitriol that obviously Tennessee fans had in the air that night. That's a good theory. It's a really good theory, and I'm all on board with it. Last one for you. What would you do to be on the call for Lane's return to Oxford?
Oh, I mean, listen. I think I need to be on that call. I think we need to I think our crew needs to have that game because I think it takes a complete understanding as much as anyone can, not only of Lane, but his history and the fan bases and how they intertwine and don't intertwine, right? And the history of that rivalry and a punt return on Halloween night for Billy Cannon and how LSU feels about Ole Miss, how Ole Miss feels about LSU. Like that is an old school rivalry that usually doesn't need much more juice. I love these games that turn into events because of off-field stuff, because then it raises the stakes in the game, and every moment is, either justification for how you feel or an injustice towards you. Jim Schlossnagle and Texas playing host to Texas A&M last year in baseball was very similar, but that was in Austin. So this year I'm doing the series in College Station, and baseball, we all know, is still, even in the SEC where it's so incredibly popular, still very much a niche sport, right? But that fires up an entire fan base, and the 12th man for that one is going to be goosed. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I don't politic for games,
I'll do it
but
for you.
yeah, there's going to be a long line of people who want that one.
Tom, here's all you need to do. You need to call Greg Sankey back, and you need to tell him, look, Sean McDonough, Greg McElroy, they're great. But when you watch Major League 2, a movie that is not very good, but when you watch Major League 2, did they take out the late, great Bob Uecker? They certainly did not. They let him run it back. And you know what? If they didn't, the movie would be even worse. And that's all you need to say. You need to be there for the sequel. This is a sequel in a weird way. And I will do everything I can to bang the drum that you, Jordan, and Cole need to be on the call for
it. Do you know who the slugger was in Major League Two? The Yankee. Do you know who that actor was in Major League and Major League Two?
I do not.
Hold please. David Keith is the actor's name.
That's David why I forgot Keith. It. That's a forgettable name.
Yeah, it's a totally normal name. What a nice guy.
It took someone with great arm strength to be able to get that mustard bottle onto the field, because that's coming from the concessions. That's coming from the concourse. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, if that's our culprit, again, statute of limitations is up. If that's our culprit, that's the story I need to tell. Let's get Pablo Torre on that one. Let's make it. I'll collab. We'll make it happen. That's the investigation that the world needs.
I wish there was better documentation of everything that ended up on the field. But my question about the mustard bottle, did the mustard bottle was it already in the bowl of the stadium? Or during this 20 minutes, did somebody rush up to the concession stand area and go to the condiment table and say, what can I take with me? What can I launch? And when was the last time a mustard bottle of that size was used on a concession stand table as opposed to the huge gallon drum with the pump? Or, just throwing this out there, was that mustard bottle already previously used as contraband to bring bourbon in? And if so, why? Like, why would they allow a mustard bottle if they're not going to allow an airplane bottle, right? Like, how did that get through security? And finally, Connor, Lane's post game, one of the fantastic lines was, I got hit with a couple of bottles that had brown stuff in it. He goes, but they wouldn't waste their moonshine on me. That's a guy who knows his audience. That is a varsity troll right there who was already hitting his peak early in his trolling career.
Better bourbon than feces. That's what I always say. Could have been worse, man. Could have been way worse.
Now, if somebody had time to do that, that would have been either elite planning or elite ad-libbing, one of the two.
An emergency that turned into just a necessity in that moment. I hope that
an opportunity. Yeah, I hope not.
Tom, you're the best.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you. Get him on the call. 2026 LSU.
Let's make it happen.
Make it happen. Thanks, man. Okay, let's pick this up with the coldest take from the broadcast. There are a few different directions you can go. I went with punters might not be needed. That was something that Tom said early on in the broadcast. And he might have actually said something funnier than that, but it was basically punters. You might just be staying on the sideline the whole night. And it's not that it was a defensive struggle. This wasn't Iowa. All right. It was not, but this game had the highest expected point total of any SEC game in 20 years. 82 was the over under for this one. I mean, 82 points. It was expected to be a track meet back and forth. And it ends up being a game in which 57 points and 10 punts. So it wasn't exactly the shootout that was expected, given the way that these two teams were able to get off to those starts early on in 2021. But I thought these defenses did a really good job of setting the tone early, getting after the quarterback early. There were a lot of times in which Hendon Hooker and Matt Corral both were like, man, I got nowhere to look. And they kind of felt like they had to turn to their legs because if they were going through their progressions, it just wasn't going to end up well. And I realized Ole Miss was a bit shorthanded with the playmakers. They ended up being without Jonathan Mingo, Braylon Sanders, and then Chase Rogers, their tight end. So many times you would see Corral have either moments of second guessing or just drop passes altogether in this one. So you can kind of understand why the defenses maybe played a little bit better than expected.
Love all that. Totally agree. And you can tell that, they did good prep in the game notes. And actually, I found out in my prep for this game that Lane Kiffin actually set the FBS record for fourth down attempts in the 2021 season, which has since been broken a couple of times. But I was thinking to myself, like, is he this like crazy fourth down mad scientist guy? Back then he was. And he's kind of come back down to earth. He's mellowed out.
He got a kicker.
That's what he did.
Thing.
Yeah. They wanted to do wide. Yeah. Now the math goes the other way because that was still kind of in the math analytics era. So yeah, and another thing that I'll note is that in these bigger games, the over, I feel like for the offensive stuff rarely hits because you see what we saw in this game. You see some miscues, you see some drops where guys, the moment is just so big, similar to Super Bowls where it's like, the big games are like Maction, Big 12 regular game where nobody's really watching, where guys are just loose.
Yeah, definitely. The Jadeveon Clowney reminder that normal people don't play this game. Name my favorite category that we do with these. Well, when I think of peak Matt Corral, I think of this specific play, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this. Ole Miss is up 24-19 with 3 minutes left in the third quarter. The offense has been quiet for almost all of the second half. It was Ole Miss scored 7 points in the second half of this one, and Corral keeps it on a zone read that fools the cameraman. It's so good. He's got center Nick Broker as the lead blocker downfield, and Corral basically pushes him. He uses Broker as like his own personal shield on this play, and he pushes him into a Tennessee defender to pick up a few more yards. But the Tennessee defender is still like part of the play. He's not totally out of it. And then Corral finishes the run by just crashing into a pair of Tennessee defenders and kind of splits them. And it's this moment of like, dang, this guy you want to stop Matt Corral at this level? Buddy, good luck. It takes an all-world performance to be able to do so. And that play is just, man, it's so big at that time. It's a 33-yard gain. It's his 23rd run of the night. And he still has that type of gas to be able to finish runs. And how he had that much still in the tank is just beyond me. It ends up leading to this Ole Miss touchdown. That's really important because it extends the lead back to 12, gets it back to a 2-score game. That's peak Matt Corral. That is how I choose to remember his college career.
You know what's funny? And I wasn't going to go back and mention this, but that was one of my like quote unquote cold takes. And I'm a little bit scared to say this because like you personally know these guys when this on here. I've met them. They've been great to me. We don't have the same relationship, so I don't want to call them cold takes. But in the first two plays, Little Misses on offense, they're like, Lane's going to do everything he can to limit the hits on Matt Corral.
Yeah.
And one of the great quotes they had was he's running like that he's like these guys are soft. And it was funny. Like I wrote down here, freeze frame or like flash forward to exactly that play where he's like pushing his offensive lineman forward and just rattling forward. It's like Lane was not trying to limit. He was like playing his own game out there. And that's why we love Matt Corral, because he never ran away from a hit.
And Matt Corral did so many of the things that I felt like Jackson Dart thought he could do. And look, Jackson Dart is, he ends up being the first round pick, and it looks like he's going to be a franchise quarterback in ways that Matt Corral wasn't. So like, I get it, but I always felt like Jackson Dart was trying to do a Matt Corral imitation, and that kind of bothered me at different points. That just guys that would never slide. They just refuse. I think I tried to count it. I think Corral only had 2 slides in this game. I think he might have had 2, because every other time he's just trying to finish off a run. He's trying to make that big time play. And with that frame, it probably added up. It probably added up, but man, they needed him to have this 33-yard gain. And at that point in the game, you're just reminded exactly what Lane Kiffin said in the pregame. What gives you that sense of calm? It's Matt Corral doing stuff like that.
Absolutely. I mean, that honestly was my 2 right there for the Jadeveon Clowney reminder that normal people don't play this game. Is both of these quarterbacks, like, I don't think I have ever seen a football game, Connor, where both quarterbacks were so committed to just dying on the field.
Yes.
Every hit these quarterbacks took, it was like no one had ever taught them how to slide. Like I actually think that Hooker might have taken worse hits than Matt Corral, and he was getting hit like the Jaden Daniels hit against Ole Miss. That was like every 5 runs for Hendon Hooker. He was getting flipped sideways. It was like RKOs. So I think the toughness of these two quarterbacks going back and forth was a really big deal.
What do you think those 2 guys felt like when they woke up on Sunday morning?
That they were in a car crash, like a literal car crash. Like people say that about an NFL game. I bet they were just like in bed. Like, I'm not going to practice. I'm going to call coach. Give me an ice bath. I did enough this week.
Over under 500 steps they took that Sunday. Way under. There's no way.
Yeah.
Dude, there's no way. All right. The Trent Richardson, I can't believe they didn't make it in the NFL. I have 2 for this. Do you want to start us off with this one, Will?
I actually want you to go first here. I'll tell you in a second.
Okay. Matt Corral, we need to put some things into context here. He has not attempted an NFL pass. He's 27 years old. That doesn't necessarily mean curtains, but at this point in his life, odds are against him. Okay. I'm convinced that injuries played a big part in that. He had is it Liz Frank or Liz Frank? Frank.
I think you just pronounced that twice the same way.
I
believe it's Liz Frank.
It's Liz Frank then, because if I can't even say it the other way, it's Liz Frank. That he had that injury in the preseason of his rookie year after he was drafted by the Panthers, and then he's waived by the Panthers before the start of year 2. And this is someone who came in at the combine 6'1.5", 212, and he's a 3rd round pick. It was ultimately a guy that was not necessarily expected to compete for a starting job from the jump, with the way that, his draft stock kind of fell in the latter half of the season, though there is a needed asterisk because it was Matt Rule who was running that operation, aka the guy that had Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield in his quarterback room and did absolutely nothing with it, and instead got fired. But
I think he was playing Baker Mayfield at defensive end at practice.
Oh my God, Matt Rule, man. Ugh. Unlike those 2 guys, he hasn't had any NFL team that's wanted to give him that second chance. Just the UFL, and even that, it's been a little bit more touch and go. It's just a bummer, because when he was right, he was such a sight to see. He really was. And this game, I do believe, was his peak. Go tell me that watching this game, that Matt Corral will never have another game of organized football in which he will have 50 rushing yards. This is his last one. Isn't that crazy, with the things he did with his legs, with how much he had that sense of awareness? He just knew when he had to tuck it and run. He knew when he had to keep it on the RPOs. Like, he just had this sense that you're just like, man, you can't teach some of the things, the feel for the game that he has. And you probably could have mentioned it for the coldest take on the broadcast as well, but Jordan mentioned many times that scouts in the first round were looking very closely at him, even in the top 10, and that this was someone who was being viewed by NFL people as like a real franchise guy. And man, it's just wild to think that he has never even come close to getting that cup of coffee in the NFL that I thought he would at least have.
Connor, I stared at these two categories for longer than any other two categories, the Jadeveon Clowney one and the Trent Richardson one. And I realized that the answers go in one direction,
Yep.
which is that both of these quarterbacks had their careers cut short by lower body injuries. And I think it was just going to happen to both of them. Watching them play this game and the way they just put their bodies on the line over and over and over again. And honestly, you could compare it to the Joe Burrow A&M performance, where he has also struggled with lower body injuries over the course of his career. And so I want to be like, oh, I lament for this. But the thing that we love about him, I don't think is really sustainable in that way. And you could see it by how these guys' careers have come, that maybe in my mind, they last another year, another 2 years. But you're so right, man. And, for me, it was hearing the Heisman stuff like, oh, Bryce Young was such a Heisman like runaway. And then you look at their numbers and you go, Matt Corral was right there. He was a projected first round draft pick. He was he had the first pick of his season in this game. And so, yeah, it's what could have been. But to me, it's almost like more of a college thing, because I think he was so well suited for that system.
You know how we talk about when we hopefully get to the pearly gates one day, we want a breakdown of time spent, doing this, all these hypotheticals that we just couldn't have had answered as mere mortals on this earth, and all these things we'd want to know of, like, oh, did like I ever cross paths with my future wife or something like that? Or like, how many times did I walk down the street and like a serial killer passed by me? Like these things that we think we're just going to get all this, this data sheet of information. I would love if 20 years from now, because this will probably take a long time, maybe 10 years from now, who knows? AI is bumping. If 10 years from now, PFF has some sort of algorithm to find that whenever a guy retires, the amount of toll that a specific game took on him. Because for these two quarterbacks, it would be so fascinating to look back on. And again, Hendon Hooker, like, we're not saying like his career is officially over or anything like that, but it's going to be an uphill battle essentially for him to become a guy, especially with how late he was going into the NFL draft. That's very well documented. But I would love to know that, because you're right, man. I think that there are probably moments in this game that they still feel 4 years later, 4.5 years later, that they're like, yeah, oh, I remember that hit. Or, oh man, that's my knee has been cracking some weird way ever since I got up from that. I bet they had a lot of moments in this game.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's why we love this sport. It's a gladiator sport. And I think that's what it is that they would have both had to fundamentally, change their game. But what they did for each of these universities, you talked about, the timelines here and how it was a revitalization for both teams. I don't necessarily think they're both like statue guys, but I think they're in that conversation. There's some great quarterbacks at both places. So I'm not going to say like that, like best ever. But I think that every fan who is around to watch these guys, like if you see them in a bar, you're going to walk up and be like, I loved you so much. And there are a few things greater, honestly, than having that respect from a whole generation of fans.
Dude, and especially too with what they succeeded. Like, look at all the quarterbacks before them that had struggled, and how desperate those two respective programs were to have guys like that. And those are the type of guys that get written off. They didn't win a Heisman Trophy, like they didn't win a national championship, they didn't go on NFL success. We can kind of lose sight of them. We should never lose sight of who Hendon Hooker and Matt Corral were at their absolute peak. Another guy for this category, Will, Jerrion Ealy. He needs to be brought up. And he's, usually with this category with the Trent Richardson, I can't believe they didn't make it in the NFL. Usually we do this for guys who pop so much in a game, and it's hard for us to watch them in this game looking back and know what their NFL careers became. And he's not one of these guys that's going to stand out in that sort of way, because he had a relatively quiet game. But I wanted to include him for a few reasons here. He has 0 career appearances in an NFL or an MLB game. This is someone who, entering college, was supposed to be the next great two-sport athlete, was a legit 5-star recruit. And on top of that, he's an Under Armour All-American in both football and baseball, the 4th person ever to do that. He was the MVP of the football All-Star game, I remember, here in Orlando, set the rushing record in the game, 116 rushing yards. And even when he commits to Ole Miss, he was, commits in February, so it was like the late signing day. There's still this like uncertainty of like, man, he might get drafted in the first round of the MLB draft. I don't know if he's going to end up coming to Ole Miss. And those stories were out. And then word gets out right before the MLB draft. No, he's like locked into doing both sports at Ole Miss. And then he just, falls like way far in the MLB draft, 31st round, I think he ended up being. That's the last time he was drafted. That is so hard to fathom because this was a guy that if you could have bought stock in him when he was 18 years old, you would have been like, buddy, you're paying an extreme premium for a guy that can do the things that he can do. And he ends up being an undrafted guy, had like an okay career at Ole Miss. And he's not a standout, in this game. 7 carries, 19 yards. He was coming off an injury the previous week. So perhaps still a little bit binged up, but like never hit 800 rushing yards in a season, playing in a crowded backfield, as you mentioned, with Henry Parrish, with Snoop Connor and those guys. So it's not like he wasn't this guy that you would look at in a given week and go, oh, he's just destined to go off. He had big time games, but just kind of surprised me that someone with his athletic ability who played so many positions. I mean, listed at one point as like a wide receiver and a running back, I think, if I remember correctly. And he just never found a way to become a pro in either sport. And probably injuries and maybe even the COVID year limited that. But just kind of strange to see the way that Jerrion Ealy was talked about and ultimately like practice squad guy just never was able to be a thing in the NFL.
Connor, you might want to cover your ears for this one because I have a lot of research on him as well. And there were 2 guys that popped to me, Dontario Drummond and Jerrion Ealy. And I went, where did these guys end up? They're very easy answers to both of them. That's why I didn't include them officially in this category. Dontario Drummond ran like a 4.7 40 at the combine. He was not fast. So therefore, he was not an NFL player.
And then Ealy was a 4.52. And when you're a 4.52 and you're less than 5'9" and less than 200 pounds, good luck.
That's why I said you need to cover your ears here, Connor, because the answer is he was 5'8". Unfortunately, if he had been a couple of inches taller, he might be a great NFL player. But when you're 5'8", you got to be Darren Sproles. Like you got to be something that is so special. Because even like McCluster towered over him,
And he was so fast too. Like you would see moments in him. They put him on kick return, and Ealy did some special things, and you could see the straight line speed. So I almost think the 4.52 was more a byproduct of those injuries, probably racking up at that point in his career, and just a guy that probably never got fully healthy. And then some, like you could look back and do the thing where you say like, oh, if he had just not, played both sports, and if he had just specialized in one, maybe he would have gone pro. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I don't think you can sit here and say that. I don't want to tell a kid stop pursuing this or start pursuing that. But yeah, just a guy that never really kind of hit that high point that I definitely thought he would when he ended up going to Ole Miss.
Yes, and fascinating player that's worth discussing them.
Yeah. Did you have anybody else for this category?
Yeah, hilariously, my answer is no one. Because I'm like, well, the 2 quarterbacks ended up where I thought they were. And then when I learned one fact about each of the players I had written down, I went, well, that makes sense. Never mind. I can't believe all of that.
Yeah. Okay. This is a good one too. The thing that you didn't know / remember until rewatching or researching this. I told you we were going to bring him up again, Will. The Velus Jones muffed punt to start this game was basically the difference in this game. Like this, I still can't believe also that the Bears drafted a return specialist like Velus Jones in the 3rd round of the 2022 NFL draft. I'm not bitter at all. Just forgot that play happened, and it was such a crucial point because the defenses, like I said, played really well early on. Like did a lot of things well, and that just set up an easy Ole Miss touchdown. And in a game that was decided by 5 points, yeah, the special teams played a difference. Now, Velus Jones kind of redeemed himself later on by getting that late return, the late punt return, post mustard bottle, post vape pen to be able to at least give Tennessee a chance in that final minute. But nonetheless, like that was a big moment in this game that kind of allowed Ole Miss to be able to quiet the crowd and weather the storm early on.
Yeah, for sure. And he did have like a pretty strong game after that, but it's like me being like, well, do I remember this guy incorrectly? To start off like that, I was like, oh, okay, this is why, he's on the level of like a Jalen Hyatt. But then he really rounded into form and had a good game. That was a really good play, like to remember. One kind of quirky thing, I didn't know that Checker Nealon was invented by fans.
Yes, had no idea. They did the backstory, and I'm blanking on the name of the fan. They showed him in this game of like the guy that came up with it. They saw Oklahoma do it and then thought, why don't we do that? And I think of Checkered Nealon as just synonymous with Nealon. And I did not realize this was only the 5th such game of that. and that Tennessee had struggled so much. They dropped to 1-4 in checkered kneeling games, but I had no idea that was like a fan creation. Apparently, like there's like a weird relationship with him in Tennessee or something like that too, that they hinted at. Didn't really want to
They found
go
his
down
browser
there.
history. They were like, we don't want to be associated with him. I'm just kidding. But they showed the tweet.
Yeah, they did show the tweet, and ultimately, go figure, tweet random things and Photoshop things, and who knows, maybe he'll get shown on a national broadcast like that. Yeah, had totally forgotten that. Will, you brought this up before, so I'll just repeat it again. First sellout at Neyland since 2017, Georgia. Crazy to think of a place that is considered one of the best atmospheres in college football, going 4 years between sellout streaks. Again, the increased attendance there makes it a bit tougher. At the same in 2020, obviously there were no sellouts that season or anything, but I did not remember that at all. Not saying I blame Tennessee fans. So I forgot that. And then I forgot how many fake injuries there were in this game and how there was this like debate. Do we show this on air? Do we show it every single time on air? Now they'll show it every single time. They kind of want to call you out. They were a little bit more selective. The production crew was back then. So yeah, just different time in 2021.
Did you count them?
I tried not to. I wanted to. It's double digits. It's got to be, right?
So for Ole Miss alone, it was 9, because I always saw that as like the Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, whatever. That's not counting Tennessee. Yeah. So that was like, because I was going into the game, I was like, this was kind of the start of this, is some of the notes I had heard on it. So yeah, that was definitely the beginning of the Lane Kiffin gamesmanship situation, especially against the Josh Heupel time of possession monster offense, which was designed to like really, that was the old Josh Heupel offense that was designed to win you. That was a good strat. I'm not gonna lie.
It was such a buzzkill too. It's one of those things. If you just watch the 20-minute, you won't have a full appreciation for it. But when you're watching these offenses go at lightning speed, and you can see the full in between, and see listen to the Tennessee boos that would come out, and I think there were a couple actual injuries where a guy like with a knee brace went to the locker room or something like that. So, but at the same time, when you have that many fake injuries, that played a part in that angst too. So really, it's probably more so 3 things that played a part in the scene that unfolded. The fake injuries, maybe 10% responsible for some of that, at least some of it, because they were tired. Tennessee fans, I don't blame y'all. Y'all were tired of watching this stoppage with your fun new. It's like being in a sports car that you just bought off the dealership, and you've got a stop sign every 50 feet. You're like, Get this thing going. All right. We don't need a stop sign. It's not even a 4-way. All right. Let's chill. Let's take this thing off and go.
Related note, Connor, with the stoppages, how quickly the first like 10 minutes of the first quarter went by. So I could only count on what the broadcast had, like no commercials, so I couldn't get real time, right? But the first 10 minutes of this first quarter only took about 22 minutes of the YouTube highlight. The next minute took 12 minutes, and then the final 5:41 took 30 minutes. So this game was supposed to be like fast, back and forth. And then they just get stuck in the mud with about 5 minutes left of the first quarter. And from there, it's just all downhill pace-wise.
Yeah, you're like in the middle of the fourth quarter if you're rewatching this on YouTube, and you're thinking to yourself, how are there still 40 minutes left in this game right now? Oh, yeah, there's the 20-minute delay that's coming up. That's going to be part of it. All right. When the losing team blew it. When the officials ruled that Tennessee was short of the line to gain on 4th and 24. Just to paint the scene one more time, because I probably haven't done a good enough job of explaining what led to all of this. This is the play that led to the golf balls, the mustard bottles, the vape pens, water bottles, every other thing. Tennessee in real time appears to have picked up a 4th and 24 with a minute to play, down 5. Jacob Warren, the tight end, appears to the naked eye and to the 107,000 fans, whatever it was, at Neyland, to have picked up this monumental first down. The initial spot, when I saw how far short of the line to gain the line judge came out, I said, oh my God, that's insane. I watched that so many times over because the initial spot is a full yard short. That spot is everything because with 54 seconds left, Ole Miss is up 31-26. And while Tennessee had all 3 timeouts left, again, as Tom Hart brought up, you're basically at best getting the ball back with 40 seconds left and like Depending on Dales Jones, great return. So like you end up getting it essentially from midfield, but it's still going to take a miracle to be able to come back and win this game, knowing that you're going to need a touchdown and you're turning the ball over and you need that 3 and out on the other side. Will, do you think it should have been a first down? Because I think I ultimately would have ruled it a first down, at least when I watched it initially, and then I wouldn't have had anything on the replay to be able to overturn that initial thought.
Yeah, that was, I mean, it was kind of crazy in real time again, like looking back at this, and like in the 4K cameras, like in the perfect sight, it just felt like in that moment, it just felt right. And then once again, referees just kind of involved themselves.
And this is the part too, where if you're just watching this play, you need to also remember what happened earlier in this game. The buildup had been there because in addition to all the fake injuries, all that stuff, all the context of Lane Kiffin, you had this play on fourth down where earlier in the game, I think it was, I can't remember which point it was in the first quarter, but Matt Corral takes a snap and then stops playing basically. And it's weird because you think the way that the quarterback reacts that there's some sort of whistle. And some guys heard it and some guys didn't. Quarterbacks just don't stop like that. But instead, there wasn't a whistle. And Matt Corral clearly just stopped playing. And maybe it was an inadvertent whistle, whatever it is. Tennessee spins him around and knocks the ball loose and initially has what looks like a scoop and score. And the play gets called back, not because there's some sort of discrepancy over the whistle. They all agree there was no whistle. That was something that Matt Corral, I don't know if he was just hearing whistles or something like that at that point in the game, but
a fan brought a whistle to the game, was just whistling.
I would not rule it out. I did not hear it. And I tried to hear for it to see maybe he had a point here. I did not initially hear it and take that for what it is. But the play gets called back because of forward progress, which is wild. So that's when pure chaos initially ensues in the first part of this game of, all right, well, Tennessee gets the football back. Yeah, because it's a fourth down play that didn't go anywhere, but they should have had a touchdown here. And it's maybe not necessarily like couches being lit on fire type of chaos, but it's, it's the in-stadium version of that is what ultimately unfolds as a result of those two big perceived missed calls that went against Tennessee. And it's kind of crazy that both of those plays went against Tennessee, knowing what was at stake and knowing that if you just told someone, hey, like going into this night, there are going to be two plays that are really going to upset Tennessee fans, you would have said, all right, I know what's going to happen for about 20 minutes of this game. And then sure enough, it did.
Yes, I think that is the kind of like I would say two of the three things that happened. So we hit on, lane stock 99, you got COVID, you got a sellout crowd, you got all this different stuff going on, right? So first we have this play, which is just absurd, right? Like no other position in football is viewed, not even like kickers. Like we watch them get blasted all the time. And like the fact that even if he had been Cam Newton, Connor, he wouldn't have converted that first down. Like the way that he caught the ball 5 yards deep and there were three guys in his face right then, he could have tried his little butt off and he wouldn't have gotten that first down. It wouldn't have mattered if he tried or if he didn't. And so them being like, oh, well, he stopped trying, I guess we have to like give it to him. That's frustrating. I'm going to say another one and then just hear me out. I think it's underrated how much this upset them. Lane Kiffin calling 3 back-to-back timeouts right before halftime. When the kicker was like lining up to kick, you're trying to hit the restroom. You're trying to, I don't think alcohol sales were, but you're trying to sneak some beer at halftime. You're going to go on a walk and you're sitting there clinching, watching Lane Kiffin laugh at you while your kicker has to be like ritual humiliated 3 different times. I think that was the middle filling. And then the fourth down you hit on initially, the 4th and 24 was the final thing that blew it up.
You're probably right. The Tennessee faithful probably did not want those 3 timeouts called. They changed that rule too, if I'm not mistaken. You can't do that anymore. And it's like I guarantee you that was one of those like early Tuesday or Wednesday mornings at SEC Media Days in which the head of officiating gets up there and explains it. And he just brought up the Lane Kiffin 3 consecutive timeouts called, try and ice the kicker. It didn't work, by the way. Still made the kick. Still did not work whatsoever. He's like, hey, got to use them, right? Lane embraced his inner troll.
Yes, and as a fan, you're almost more bad. You're like, you wasted my time. Like I said, just seeing him smirk, seeing him, if you hate someone, that's the last thing you want to see.
Yeah, man. So let's get back to ultimately this very, I don't want to say pandemonium moment, but there could have been a lot of other things that happened in addition to the physical violence that could have built up. And this could have really been Lane Stock 99. The Stay Classy Tennessee fans crowd would point out that this is just totally uncalled for and that better fan bases would not have acted this way when they did not get their way. I get that. The point that needs to be remembered, Tennessee still had a chance to win this game. Tennessee still had a chance to win this game.
Dude, that was the craziest thing about this is after the 20-minute delay, they come back and play lights out defense. Like there's some weird corral stuff where he kind of loses it and takes a bad sack. And you're like, this is exactly when you think you get a free first down because everybody's just like scared.
If Tennessee comes back and wins this game, I think it replaces, the band is out on the field. I think it replaces Stanford Cal as like one of the craziest endings you will ever possibly see, given the context, given the fact that I even rewatching this, I'm waiting for, surely they're just not going to play this game. They're just going to cancel. They're just going to forfeit the rest of this game. And Lane said afterwards that he wasn't necessarily advocating for that to just run off the locker room. He wouldn't ever want that out there. I don't know what exactly Lane said to the officials. Only he will know that. He and the good Lord will know those things. But there's still this feeling of, wait, they're going to play football now? They're going to play football after all this, after all these objects are being thrown on the field. They're trying to clean this play up. And
Disney played some of their best football of the day, directly starting right there.
3 and out. Defense plays with its hair on fire. Gets
great return.
Great return by Velus Jones. And then suddenly all this pressure is on Ole Miss with 27 seconds left to play. And the band has literally left the field. So I guess this is kind of the inverse of Cal Stanford in some ways. They are piping in Rocky Top. They're piping in Rocky Top. And
the Jock Jams Rocky Top that has like the built-in chants just for the crowd noise, which I don't think they needed help with crowd noise at that point.
No, they definitely didn't. But yeah, and all the fans are like moving down because the band had been kicked out and everything. And so you get this big run by Hendon Hooker, but he's hurting. So he goes down. And Joe Milton comes in and 2 excellent touch passes, the first of which moves the chains. And then the second, which is the Cedric Tillman back of the end zone, just out of the reach of his outstretched arms. I keep mentally going back and forth on whose fault it was. I tend to think it would have been a really nice play to make. And I don't fault Joe Milton for putting the football where he did on that play. And I think he gave him a chance to win. Like I really do. I always forget that they were inches away from winning this game in an unbelievable fashion. And there would have been 3 seconds left with that touchdown. Like think about that and what that would have been. But instead, you have 3 seconds left, and Joe Milton realizes way too late that he cannot run in this touchdown. He's scrambling, and as he's running out of bounds, he like looks up at the clock as if he's going to have time left on the clock. And I'm like, Joey boy, what are we doing? What are we doing, man? You can't end the game that way. And so that's what everybody remembers. This game deserved one crazy, chaotic final play. I want to replay that final play with Joe Milton knowing that he has only 3 seconds left on the clock.
You know what's crazy? Like, when did the losing team decide that like lose this game? Right then. Honestly, the ball was going off of Tillman's hands the play before.
Oh, not quite. It just
it hit him in one glove. Like, I went back and watched that so many times, and I'm going to just add insult to injury here. There's another play in recent Tennessee football history that this made me think of. Do you know what it was?
Was it Dobbs nail boot?
Arkansas 2024 ended exactly the same way. And I thought I was a genius for realizing this. Hypo got asked about it after the game. And he was like, well, Nico got shoved out of bounds. Joe Milton just decided to walk out of bounds.
Joe Milton walked out of bounds on his own volition. It's a tough look. You kind of can't come back from that in some ways. You'll always be the guy that did not have that presence of mind in that moment. And it's a tough look. And for all the angst of that, it's just kind of this, all right. I thought of this, Will. The top 5 people who would have added the most fuel to the fire that night besides Kiffin, of like all the same things happening with, the perceived missed calls, the faking injuries and stuff like that. If you just put someone in Lane's place to be able to rile up that crowd where they would have had that type of animosity, where golf balls still would have been thrown in their direction, all that stuff. The 5 people I got for you. One is Spurrier. Come on. AKA the guy that Kiffin idolizes.
His
of
hero.
course.
That's why he's in Florida now.
Spurrier would have tried to catch one of those suckers in his teeth. Come on. Who are we kidding? Charles Woodson, people forget, stole the Heisman. That belonged to Peyton. ESPN gave Peyton Manning the Heisman Trophy. We mustn't ever forget. Number 3 is just ESPN in general for that exact reason. I feel like we can make that a 2-parter. That's perfectly fine. Tennessee fans, you don't disagree. Number 4 is Butch, AKA the guy who made a trash can a rallying cry. Very mixed messages there. Butch is holding up the trash can. They're throwing trash in the field. He's thinking he's just having fun interacting with the crowd. He's like, oh, this thing is doing a lot better than that whole brick by brick thing. This is great. And number 5 is obviously the one and only couch burning man himself, Greg Schiano. And by couch burning man himself, I mean the guy that prompted couch burning, because, man, can you imagine if they had hired him instead of Jeremy Pruitt? Man, what a failure it would have been.
Well, he's a great one because he would have fought fans. I mean, I think he's the only one who's in Lane's conversation. Like, the timeout thing is an act of aggression. Schiano would have been jawing at fans for a lot of this game. He was that type of guy.
I'm a little biopicked out, and I realize this can't happen because he is unfortunately no longer with us. But any sort of Greg Schiano biopic, which would have included a fascinating Tennessee chapter, James Gandolfini plays him in the biopic, right? Like, I can't think of one without thinking of the other. I'm not alone in that. Someone agrees with me on that.
You gotta watch The Sopranos, man. It's calling you.
I know. I do. I really do. There's a really good movie that James Gandolfini was in as the villain. And I definitely just saw on my feed yesterday that HBO reported, there was rumors that HBO paid him $3 million to not replace Steve Carell in The Office, which is a crazy thing to think of. Wild sliding doors, what it would have looked like. And I'm not saying like the D'Angelo Vickers. I'm saying like the Robert California and then nothing type role. Anyway, that's another discussion for another time.
This keeps going. Anyway.
It just does. What would have happened if the result was flipped? The sliding doors. I have a wild sliding doors to throw at you, Will.
Well, we would all think Tennessee fans were a delight.
We would all say that fan base just gets it. Tennessee fans, I love you. If I don't say this enough today, because this sounds like just an anti-Tennessee pod, I love you guys. You guys are the reason that we are allowed to do this, and you are the reason.
And you got bleeped on this day. I think we're all pretty in concert here that you didn't have the right to do that. I'm an LSU fan though. Who am I to talk? I mean, I've never thrown anything onto a field, but plenty of LSU fans have.
Is there a proper way? This is just going to encourage more stuff being thrown on the field. Is a hook shot the better throw because it's maybe not as obvious than the baseball throw or the shot put, which if you're trying to get away with a crime here, I would think a hook shot, maybe a little bit less pronounced. You can kind of put it behind you a little bit. I'm just trying to do it on the camera for the YouTube audience to see what it would look like. That's still pretty demonstrative, actually. That wouldn't really work. All right. What would have happened if the result were flipped? I think it changes the entire complexion of the conference, and here's why. If Ole Miss had lost this game to Tennessee, let's say Cedric Tillman does catch that pass, or Joe Milton does anything other than just drift out of bounds. If Ole Miss had lost this game, I think Lane Kiffin is currently the head coach at Auburn. How's that for sliding doors? A loss in this game would have knocked Ole Miss out of the New Year's Six Bowl conversation, which at the time is still a big deal in the 14 playoff era. And it's a big deal at a place like Ole Miss that, again, not exactly a place that expects to go to New Year's Six Bowls every single year. But they win this game. They go 10-2 in the regular season. They get to the Sugar Bowl. It's a lost game because Corral goes down in the first quarter of that game. But it's a historic 10-win regular season that is very much celebrated at Ole Miss. So you don't have that New Year's Six Bowl appearance in year 2, and year 3 remains a rebuilding year with Jackson Dart in 2022, a team that started off fast, and then that LSU game, pretty much after that, they really faded down the stretch. Maybe they just benefited from a favorable schedule early on. So that's at the point where Auburn's going through that change. And Ole Miss probably would have been coming off of a Citrus Bowl in 2021, and then, they are en route to the Texas Bowl in 2022. So you don't have that New Year's Six Bowl appearance. Does Lane see through 3 years in Oxford, the same amount of time he was at FAU, the same amount of time that he was at Alabama, does Lane see a lower ceiling and leave Auburn after year 3, even if Landry's iMovie skills proved to be the difference in getting him to stay? Is that the one game that he looks back on as like, man, this was fun. I was in the national spotlight. This was everything I hoped it would be when I came onto this job. And if he lost that game, especially in devastating fashion, maybe that changes everything. I don't know. That's my sliding doors for this one.
And he's a guy that is pretty mercurial, right? You talked about like a Canva presentation. Shout out Canva. Shout out Jordan Hudson, right? Like that really did sway him. And so that being said,
iMovie, I think it was iMovie. Ultimately, it was a slideshow.
That's true.
Canva's got some versatility.
Canva kind of rules. Anyway, there's no Canva slander. You're so right. So that being said, like that was like one of, if not the happier moment, for him at Ole Miss, where it goes, okay, like this is why I look back on my Ole Miss time and say this is why I love it here. This moment on the field, say they don't really like me, all this different stuff, and that really brought everyone together. And you're so right. So I mean, that doesn't shock me at all, considering how close he was.
If Lane had a list of his favorite wins through those first 3 years in Oxford, this has to top it. And it's not to say that it was like his most impressive win. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying in terms of what he was seeking at that point in his life. And suddenly if you wipe that off and that becomes a bad memory, it's a devastating memory in which all this chaos happens and he's again the butt of the joke and he gets laughed out of that stadium. I just wonder, maybe it changes things. And if you remember, so the day after this game is when Ed Orgeron got fired at LSU. Ironically enough, they played Florida that morning. They beat Florida that morning. And then Coach O is gone the next day, and they let him coach out the season, of course, because there's no better interim coach than Coach O. But that's just such a weird intersection of history with the SEC that maybe I'm just totally crazy. But I really do think if you look at the way that could have impacted their season and what they would have probably fallen short of through 3 years, I think there's a real case to be made that he's at Auburn right now if they had lost this game.
Yeah, or LSU. Maybe that's the thing. Like we really don't know because I mean they weren't even a contender at that point. So yeah, I think that's the thing about Lane. Anything can happen.
He would have had to have taken the LSU job after year 2 at Ole Miss. So it's a different sort of timeline than what it would have been post 2022 at Auburn. So maybe a little bit tougher. But yeah, it could have changed a lot of stuff. All right. Do you have one for this as well? What would have happened if the result was flipped? Besides, we would have felt differently we would have thought Tennessee fans were just the best.
Yeah, that was kind of my joke around it is like ultimately I don't think it mattered in terms of that perception because that stuff had already kind of happened. And the way they would have won the game, I think would have been at the end. Like I think the most likely path to a win. Let's say, sliding doors, like we just talked about, you take off a call, you take it off here, there. But I think this was gonna happen no matter what. Like unless Tennessee is up 30 points and guys are at the bars partying, I think this animosity would have created something that was a bad look.
Does Tennessee turn back to Joe Milton if Joe Milton completes that pass?
Now there we go. Now there we go. Does Hendon Hooker lose his job, and then does Josh Heupel potentially lose his job for never having the next season?
And maybe it would have taken long for Josh Heupel to lose that next season, but basically you could try and copy and paste like the 2023 Joe Milton into 2022 Tennessee. And the irony is that Joe Milton in relief in 2022 was awesome. He was really, really good that year. And he and Squirrel White would just get in there and he'd throw like 60-yard touchdown passes. I would argue that reserve Joe Milton in 2022 was the best version of him that we got. But that's another one too, where you just kind of never know. And instead it just did not play out like that. This is an obvious one that we'll close on here, Will. The player image that we'll always remember when thinking of this game. Come on. There's one answer. It's Lane Kiffin with a golf ball. It's Lane Kiffin with a golf ball, post-game with Cole. It was his Instagram profile pic up until he left for LSU, I'm pretty sure, as well. It's like it's just burned into your brain if you followed Lane on social media platforms and whatnot. And it's kind of the perfect encapsulation of who Lane was and who Lane is, even at this stage in his life. And it begs the question, what will be thrown at Lane when he returns to Oxford? All the different objects, because now, Ole Miss fans, I'm not encouraging throwing anything on the field. I am not encouraging that. Let the record show. Okay, do not clip this and say that I am saying throw stuff on the field. But if you are so inclined and you can't help your arm from being able to go over the top, and there's just an object that has to come out of your arm in some Henry Rowan Garner alternate universe sort of thing, choose wisely and be creative, because Tennessee fans, I think they did a lot. You can't just, a red solo cup is not going to fly. That would troll Lane probably the best, come to the sip, his whole mantra and everything, but get creative. If you are going to, break the law, don't hurt anyone. This was a bad idea. I shouldn't have suggested that.
Belt buckles, rocks wrapped in Peter Millar.
A bunch of fake rats for rat poison.
Ooh, fake rats would be good now.
That won't hurt anyone. Yeah,
Hard
really.
to sneak in, but look the other way, Oxford PD.
Come on, yeah, like Oxford PD. Look, if Tennessee PD can, or probably Knoxville PD, if they can let in all of those cigars for the Bama game, come on. Like Ole Miss, this is when you step up. This is when you step up and allow those fake rats to come into your stadium.
You know what I will say on this one? I do have a different answer, but I think you make a great point about the golf ball thing and how it lived way past this because it was Lane Kiffin's Abbey, and that's what's been associated with Lane Kiffin during his rise. The image that always stuck out to me, man, was those Tennessee cheerleaders covering their heads and running into the stadium. That is one of the craziest things. It's like your own people aren't even safe. And, in the kind of the post-COVID world, we're like, really, who's looking out for us? The university goes, this isn't safe for our cheerleaders. And then you look and go, our players are still out there.
That is a good point. That is a great point where they're just covering up and they're about to get hit. And it's, again, like we can look back now and be thankful that this wasn't even worse for how long this lasted. But that is such a great image too. That definitely defined this game. Gosh, what a wild one.
Like the cheerleaders are out, the dance team is out, the band is out. And you look at the field, it's like, yeah, whole football staff is here. Trainers, like everybody, the tents are still up. And it's like, are these people at risk? Like I said, this could have gone a couple of ways. So I don't know. That was the wildest part of this. Tennessee protecting its own students from its students.
Yeah, that is wild. Ole Miss players on the sideline. Some of them were like doing this, like, come on, is that all you got? Like, throw it out here, which that probably did not help. I mean, it didn't exactly make it better. Imagine if you're prompted to throw something and you just point, and you're like, hey, the left tackle told me that I couldn't hit him in the head. I had to at least try. You don't want that. Please email us, theogkickoff@gmail.com. Statute of limitations is up. Email us if you threw something on the field that night, or if you were there and maybe you were next to someone who threw something on the field. And if you threw the mustard bottle, and if you really did, and not just say you did, don't take that secret to the grave. The internet deserves this to be out in the open. I need to get my hands on that piece of information of who threw the golf ball as well. Open invite to come on the show.
We will not say your name. I'm good enough at video editing that I can blur your face if you want to come on the show. Unless you say, my name is XYZ, say that on air, we will keep this a secret, safe place for you.
Perfect. Well, that's a wrap. That'll do it. That is the first edition of It Just Meant More that we are doing with the OG Kickoff. Next game that we're doing, I'm so excited to do these. We were already texting about our next game earlier today before we even started recording this. 2009 SEC Championship is the plan. Okay. And at some point I'll put like the list of the games that we've already done. So while I definitely appreciate people, please email us, theogkickoff@gmail.com. Also go back in the archives and make sure it's not a game that we've already done. There's like a list of 25 of these games that I should probably just publish somewhere just so that people aren't like, why have you done this game? It's like, oh yeah, well, we definitely did, this game, and this game. So I promise you, we will try and do as many of these as humanly possible because there are a lot of good classic SEC football games. That's the
yes. And I will say too, this, like the perfect storm of Lane Stock 99, they're not all going to be this long. That we're just both content machines, and this is a game that every second of it something happened. So yeah, I'm excited about. I have one random fact I want to share with you before we get out of here.
Fire away, Will.
Okay, this was in a weird hole in the college football rules calendar, and this was my example for how it was such a transitional period. The year before this, the numbers rule changed. So this game featured a holding on a number 0, which was only possible for a year until this game. But yet it was 2 years before the clock rules, which would have completely changed the outcome of this game. This game had to happen on this day.
That's when just a very unique moment in time. It had to happen this way. Yeah, the clock rules changing definitely changed the way that Tennessee operates, changed the way that Ole Miss operates. That's why we need to appreciate it. It's why we need to spend all 3 hours and 50 minutes to rewatch the full version of this game. Early 2020s football. Someday people will look back and, like the people that just hope that the BCS era will somehow come back. They'll look back on early 2020s football and go, that was a simpler time. That was a simpler time. All right, that'll do it. Please follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, the OG Kickoff. Like I said, email us, theogkickoff@gmail.com, the OG Kickoff on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, @CJ O'Gara, @GoSoHard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.